The garage door slammed so hard the whole building seemed to shake. The sound cut through the storm like a gunshot. For a moment, everything stopped. The rain outside kept pounding the pavement, loud and endless. But inside the shop, silence felt like a heavy blanket. Marcus had been bent over the open hood of the car, his hands deep in grease, his face lit by the harsh white light hanging from the ceiling. Sparks had flown just seconds ago. The air smelled like oil, metal, and sweat. His shirt clung to his back, damp from hours of work. He was tired, but he kept moving, because in places like this, you didn't get the luxury of stopping. The car in front of him was a masterpiece of wealth. Smooth black paint, chrome shining even under dirty shop lights. The kind of luxury vehicle Marcus only saw when someone rich got scared enough to bring it somewhere they thought was beneath them. It was worth more than the whole shop, more than the tools, more than Marcus's paycheck. For the next 10 years, he wiped his forehead with the back of his arm and leaned closer, listening to the engine like it was speaking a language only he understood. Marcus had always been good at that. Engines didn't lie. People did, but engines didn't. Then the door slammed open. Cold air rushed inside, carrying rain and the smell of expensive cologne. A tall figure stepped into the shop. Perfect suit, perfect shoes, not a single drop of water on him. Like the storm itself knew better than to touch him, his presence filled the room before he even spoke. Billionaire Grant Holloway. The name alone carried weight. The kind of man who appeared on magazine covers. The kind of man who built towers in cities and called them legacies. The kind of man who didn't walk into places like this unless something had gone wrong. And when things went wrong for Grant Holloway, someone always paid for it. His eyes swept across the garage like he was inspecting a property he might buy just for fun. His gaze landed on Marcus, then the car, then back to Marcus. His voice was sharp. Cold. Is this the best you can do? The words hung in the air. Marcus froze. The wrench in his hand stopped mid-turn. Behind him, one of the younger workers, Jamal, paused with a rag in his hands. Another mechanic slowly lowered a tire he had been carrying. Even the old radio in the corner seemed quieter, as if it didn't want to interrupt. Grant stepped closer, his shoes clicking against the concrete floor like a countdown. Marcus straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a stained cloth. He didn't rush. He didn't bow. But his shoulders were heavy, like he already knew what kind of night this was about to become. Grant pointed at the car with a stiff finger. My engine was fine before it came here. Now it's worse. His voice rose at the end, accusing, like Marcus had committed a crime. Marcus blinked once. His face stayed calm, but inside, something tightened. He spoke carefully. I told you the damage was deeper than you thought. It wasn't just a simple fix. Grant's jaw clenched. You're telling me I'm wrong? The billionaire took another step forward, closing the distance between them. Marcus could smell the expensive cologne now, could feel the heat of Grant's anger. The man's eyes were sharp, full of entitlement. Marcus didn't back up, but he didn't step forward either. He just stood there, caught between pride and survival. Grant's voice lowered, dangerous. You mechanics always have excuses when you mess something up. Marcus's fingers curled slightly around the rag. I didn't mess it up, he said, still controlled. I'm trying to repair what was already broken. Grant laughed once. Not a real laugh. A bitter sound. You people always say that. The words hit the room like a slap. The workers behind Marcus stiffened. Jamal's eyes widened. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. That familiar burn. The one that came from being seen as less. The one that came from being talked down to no matter how skilled you were, no matter how hard you worked. Marcus swallowed. He had learned a long time ago that anger could cost you everything. Grant looked around the shop again, taking the cracked walls, the old toolboxes, the worn-out floor. He sneered. I don't even know why I brought my car here. Marcus's voice stayed steady. Because your dealership couldn't figure it out. That was the truth. The fancy place with marble floors and free coffee had failed. And now the billionaire was standing in Marcus's garage, angry that the world didn't bend perfectly to his will. Grant's eyes flashed. Watch your tone. Marcus's jaw tightened. My tone is fine. The engine is a problem. Grant stepped closer, towering now, his shadow falling over Marcus like a storm cloud. The billionaire's voice grew louder, echoing off the metal walls. I pay people to solve my problems, not to talk back, not to waste my time. Marcus felt every pair of eyes in the shop on him. He could feel the tension, like a wire pulled too tight. Grant leaned in, his face inches away. I'll give you one chance, he said slowly, each word heavy. Fix it tonight, or you'll regret ever touching my car. The rain outside seemed louder suddenly. Marcus's heart pounded, but his face didn't change. He had heard threats before, not always spoken so cleanly, not always wrapped in wealth. But the meaning was the same. You are small, I am powerful, and you will do what I say. Marcus took a slow breath. He glanced at the car again, then back at Grant. This wasn't just about metal and wires anymore. It wasn't just about an engine. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about what happens when a man with nothing is forced to stand in front of a man who has everything. Grant straightened up, adjusting his cufflinks like the conversation was already over. His voice turned cold again. I'll be waiting. He moved toward the corner of the shop, where an old chair sat beside a workbench. He didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. He sat down like he owned the place. The billionaire crossed one leg over the other and stared at Marcus, watching, judging. Marcus stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of it all. His shop, his livelihood, his pride, his father's name painted on a sign outside, fading but still there. He could hear his father's voice in his head. Keep your head up, son, even when they try to push it down. Marcus turned back to the engine. His hands moved again, slow and steady. The workers around him began to move too, but carefully, quietly, like they were afraid the wrong sound might set Grant off again. The storm raged outside. Inside, something else was building. Not just tension, not just anger. Something deeper. Marcus leaned in close to the engine, listening. He wasn't just fixing a car tonight. He was fighting for something invisible, for respect, for survival, for the right to be seen as a man, not a servant. Grant's eyes stayed on him, unblinking. The billionaire thought this was about control. He thought this was about money. He thought Marcus would break. But Marcus kept working, the sound of tools echoing in the silence. And as the night stretched on, one truth became clear. This garage wasn't just a place of repair. It was a battleground. And the challenge had only just begun. The storm wasn't the only thing that would shake this night. Not even close. Grant Holloway didn't just want his car fixed. That became clear the longer he stayed. This wasn't about an engine. It wasn't even about money. It was about control. The kind of control rich men think they deserve just because they have more digits in their bank account than most people will ever see in their lifetime. The storm outside kept raging, rain hammering the roof like a warning. Inside the garage, the air grew heavier with every passing minute. Marcus worked under the hood, his hands moving with skill and focus, but his mind could not relax. Not with Grant sitting there. Not with those cold eyes watching every move like a judge waiting for a mistake. Grant stood up again, restless. He paced the shop slowly, like a lion walking in circles inside a cage that was too small for his ego. His polished shoes clicked against the concrete floor, loud in the quiet. He looked at the walls, the old tools, the worn-out shelves. His lips curled in disgust. This is where you work, he muttered. Marcus didn't answer. He kept tightening a bolt, listening to the engine, staying calm. Silence was sometimes safer. Grant stepped closer. You think because you can turn a wrench you're somebody? The words were sharp, humiliating. They weren't meant to ask a question. They were meant to remind Marcus of his place. Marcus's fingers paused for half a second. Just one beat. Then they kept moving. He had heard people talk like this before. Men with power always found ways to make working hands feel small. They spoke like labor was something dirty, like service was something shameful. But Marcus knew the truth. This shop was not shameful. This shop was everything. It was built from nothing, brick by brick. Late nights, early mornings. His father's hands had built it first. His father, a man who never had much, but always had pride. Marcus could still remember being a boy, sweeping floors, watching his dad fix cars with patience like it was holy work. "This place will feed you," his father used to say. "It will keep you standing when the world tries to push you down." And now Marcus was standing here, trying to keep it alive. Grant scoffed again, louder this time. "I could buy this entire street," he said, spreading his arms as if the world belonged to him, "and not notice the money missing." The workers nearby exchanged glances. Jamal looked down at the floor, his face tight. Another mechanic clenched his jaw, but stayed quiet. Nobody wanted trouble. Nobody wanted the kind of trouble that followed a billionaire. Marcus felt something twist inside his chest. He kept working. Grant leaned on a workbench, staring at Marcus like he was entertainment. "You know," Grant said, voice dripping with arrogance, "people like you should be grateful." "Grateful? I even walked into this dump." Marcus's breath came slow, controlled. "People like you." Those 3 words carried history. Pain. A lifetime of being seen as less. Marcus had spent years learning how to swallow his anger, how to smile when disrespected, how to survive in a world where men like Grant could destroy your life with one phone call and never lose sleep over it. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way Grant looked at him like he wasn't human. Or maybe it was the fact that Marcus had worked too hard, suffered too long, to be spoken like a child in his own shop. Marcus finally stood up slowly. He wiped his hands on a rag. His voice was low, calm, but heavy. "And yet," Marcus said, turning to face him, "you're standing in my garage at midnight." The words fell into the air like a stone into still water. For a moment, everything froze. The workers gasped softly. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Grant's face changed. His eyes narrowed, sharp with disbelief. He stepped forward. "You don't talk to me like that." Marcus didn't move. This was the moment where power always tried to crush pride. Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, 2 large men stood near a black SUV. Security. Silent. Watching. The billionaire never came alone. Men like him always brought muscle, even to a mechanic shop. Inside, Marcus stood alone with nothing but his hands. Grant's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "You think you're brave?" he said. "You think you're special because you fix a few cars." Marcus's heart pounded, but his face stayed steady. Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen glowed bright in the dim shop. "I should shut this place down," Grant said casually, like he was discussing the weather. "One call, one complaint. Health inspectors, licenses, permits. You'll never work again." The words were calm. That was what made them terrifying. Marcus swallowed hard. The injustice was familiar. The world always believed men like Grant. Men with suits. Men with money. Men with connections. Not men like Marcus. Not a black mechanic with grease under his nails. Grant leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "Fix it," he said, "or you'll pay." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. The shop was silent except for rain and the faint hum of the overhead lights. Then Marcus turned back to the engine, not because he was weak, but because he had something to protect. His family, his workers, his father's legacy. Grant smirked as if he had won. He returned to the chair in the corner and sat down again, crossing his legs like a king watching peasants work. Hours passed. The night stretched long. The rain didn't stop. Marcus worked with aching arms. His hands grew black with grease. His back burned. His eyes stung from exhaustion. But he didn't stop. Every time he reached for a tool, he felt Grant's gaze. Every time he leaned into the engine, he heard Grant's voice in his head. "You people, this dump, grateful." Marcus's crew tried to help, but Marcus shook his head. "Go home," he murmured. "I've got it." They hesitated. Jamal stepped closer. "Marcus, you shouldn't be alone with him." Marcus gave a tired smile. "I've been alone with men like him my whole life." One by one, the workers left, their footsteps fading into the storm. Soon, it was just Marcus, Grant, and the broken car. The billionaire checked his watch like time itself belonged to him. Marcus kept working. At one point, Grant spoke again, voice bored. "What's taking so long?" Marcus didn't answer. Grant sighed dramatically. You know, I could have had this fixed in an hour somewhere else. Marcus's hands paused. Then he spoke quietly. Then why didn't you? Grant didn't respond. Because the truth was something Grant couldn't admit. The dealership couldn't fix it. The expensive experts couldn't solve it. And the billionaire hated that the only person who was the man he looked down on. Marcus bent closer to the engine, studying deeper. And then, as the hours crawled by, Marcus realized something terrifying. Grant didn't want the car repaired. Not really. The car was just an excuse. Grant wanted something else. He wanted Marcus broken. He wanted Marcus to feel small. He wanted Marcus to bow his head and remember his place. The billionaire wasn't testing an engine. He was testing a man's dignity. Marcus's jaw tightened. His hands kept moving. But inside, a storm was rising that had nothing to do with the rain. And somewhere deep in that engine, something was waiting. Something Marcus hadn't seen yet. Something that would change everything. The night was far from over. The sky outside was still dark, but the night was beginning to weaken. The rain had slowed to a soft drip from the roof. The world felt quiet, like it was holding its breath before morning arrived. Inside the garage, the air was thick with exhaustion. The lights buzzed overhead. Tools lay scattered. Marcus's hands were stained black. His shoulders ached like stone. He had been working for hours. Grant Holloway sat in the corner, watching like a man who believed patience was a gift only he could afford. His suit was still perfect. His face was still cold. But Marcus was different now. Marcus looked like a man who had been fighting an invisible battle all night. The engine was open like a wound. Marcus leaned in close, listening again. He had checked everything. Fuel lines, sensors, wiring. The problem didn't make sense. The damage was too strange, too deliberate. And Marcus hated things that didn't make sense. His father had taught him something when he was young. If you can't find the problem, son, it's because someone doesn't want you to. Marcus had laughed back then. Tonight, he wasn't laughing. His fingers moved slowly, carefully, deeper into the engine system. He pulled back a bundle of wires, tracing them with mechanic's instinct. His eyes narrowed. His breathing slowed. Then he saw it. Something small. Something hidden. Something that didn't belong. Marcus froze. His breath caught in his throat. It was lodged deep inside, tucked away like a secret. A device no normal mechanic would expect to find. Not a broken part. Not wear and tear. Not an accident. Sabotage. Marcus stared at it for a long moment, his mind racing. The room suddenly felt colder. He reached in carefully and pulled it out. A small black box. Wires connected. Metal sharp. Purposeful. Marcus held in his palm like it was a snake. Grant's voice cut through the silence. Well, he said impatiently, did you finally figure out what you broke? Marcus didn't answer right away. He turned slowly. His eyes met Grant's. And for the first time that night, Marcus wasn't just tired. He was awake. This wasn't an accident, Marcus said, voice low. Grant raised an eyebrow, amused. Oh, he said, and what is it then? Another excuse. Marcus stepped forward, holding the device up in the light. Grant leaned slightly, squinting. Marcus's voice sharpened. This is a tracker and a remote kill switch. The words fell heavy. The air shifted. Grant's smirk faltered, just for a second. A flicker. Something Marcus hadn't seen before. Fear, Marcus continued, his voice steady but firm. Someone wanted this car to fail. Grant stood slowly from his chair. His movements were quick now, tense. That's ridiculous, he snapped. Prove it. Marcus's eyes didn't blink. This isn't something you find in a normal engine, Marcus said. This is a mistake. This is planted. Grant's jaw clenched. Marcus took another step closer. You didn't bring me a broken car, he said quietly. You brought me a trap. The words hung in the air like smoke. Grant's face hardened. Watch yourself, he warned, voice sharp. The billionaire's power returned for a moment, like armor sliding back into place. But Marcus wasn't finished. Not anymore. He had spent the whole night swallowing disrespect, swallowing threats, swallowing humiliation. But now, Marcus had the truth in his hand. And truth has a way of breaking power. Marcus held the device tighter. This kind of tech isn't random, he said. It's not cheap. It's not something a street mechanic installs for fun. Grant scoffed. You think you know everything now? Marcus didn't flinch. I know enough. Grant took a step forward, towering again, trying to reclaim control. You're accusing me, he said. You think I sabotaged my own car? Marcus shook his head slowly. No, he said. I think someone wanted you to blame me. Grant's eyes narrowed. The storm outside had quieted, but inside, something was building. Grant's voice dropped. You're playing a dangerous game. Marcus's voice stayed calm. No, Mr. Holloway, he said. You are. Silence. The billionaire stared at him, breathing heavier now. Marcus could see it. The arrogance was cracking. Because Grant wasn't used to being confused. Grant wasn't used to not being in control. Marcus looked down at the device again, his mind working fast. He recognized the wiring, the design, the placement. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory. He reached into his pocket slowly. Grant watched him carefully, suspicion rising. Marcus pulled something out, an old photograph, worn at the edges, folded too many times. Marcus held it up. It showed a younger version of himself, clean-cut, serious eyes, standing beside another man in a military uniform, both of them staring into the camera with the weight of duty on their faces. Grant blinked, confused. What is that? He asked. Marcus's voice softened, but only slightly. I recognize this technology, Marcus said quietly. Grant stared harder. Marcus continued. I used to build systems like this. The garage fell silent. Even the buzzing lights seemed quieter. Grant's face shifted. What are you talking about? He demanded. Marcus looked down at his grease-covered hands. These hands didn't always fix cars, he said. Before this shop, before the oil and the rust, I served. Grant's mouth opened slightly. Marcus's voice grew heavier. I was military intelligence. The words landed like thunder. Grant froze. For the first time, the billionaire didn't know what to say. His eyes searched Marcus's face like he was seeing him for the first time. You were, Grant whispered, almost unwilling to believe it. Military intelligence? Marcus nodded once. I served this country, he said. I protected men like you, men who sleep safe because people like me stood in the dark. Grant's arrogance cracked wider. His voice was quieter now. Then why are you here? He asked, almost like a child asking a question he didn't want the answer to. Marcus gave a bitter smile. Because when I came home, he said, nobody wanted to hire me. Grant stared. Marcus continued, the pain rising behind his calm. I had skills, training, experience. But all they saw was a black man with no connections. No suit, no billion-dollar name. His eyes flashed. So I built this shop, with my father, with my own hands, because the world left me no other choice. Grant's throat moved as he swallowed. The billionaire looked shaken, not because Marcus was angry, but because Marcus was real. He wasn't just a mechanic. He wasn't just you people. He was a man with a past, a man with sacrifice, a man with truth. Grant's voice came out rough. So this device? Marcus lifted it again. This is professional, he said. This is targeted. Grant's breathing quickened. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. And whoever planted it wanted you to blame me. Grant's eyes darted. Why would anyone do that? He asked sharply, but there was fear underneath. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he delivered the final blow. The person who planted this, Marcus said slowly, is someone close to you. The words hit Grant like a punch. Grant's face went pale. His world tilted. His mind raced through names, faces, people he trusted, people who smiled in boardrooms and shook his hand. No, Grant whispered. Marcus's eyes stayed steady. Yes, he said. Grant took a step back, suddenly unsteady, like the ground beneath his wealth was cracking open. The billionaire had walked into that garage thinking he was dealing with a nobody, a man he could threaten, a man he could break. But now, Grant realized something terrifying. He wasn't the one in control. He never had been. And as dawn crept closer outside, the truth inside that garage was rising faster than the sun. Because the real question was no longer whether the car could be fixed. The real question was, who wanted Grant Holloway destroyed? And why? Grant stood frozen, staring at Marcus, his empire suddenly feeling fragile. And Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The first light of morning crawled across the wet street outside the garage, pale and tired, like it'd seen too much. The storm had finally eased, leaving behind puddles that reflected the broken streetlights and the thin gray sky. Inside the shop, the air still smelled like oil and metal, but something else was there now, too. A shift, a crack in the old order. The kind of crack that can't be patched with money. Grant Holloway stood near the car, staring at the small device in Marcus's hand like it was a grenade that had almost gone off in his face. The billionaire suit was still perfect, but the man inside it wasn't. His shoulders looked tighter. His jaw wasn't set with pride anymore. His eyes weren't full of control. They were full of questions. Marcus didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held the truth up under the harsh shop lights, and he let it do what truth always does. He let it expose everything. Grant's hands trembled as Marcus explained what the device meant, not in a dramatic way. Not like a movie villain. In a quiet way. In a human way. Like a man who had never imagined fear could reach him. This isn't just a tracker, Marcus said, his voice steady. It's designed to kill the engine at the worst moment. On the highway, at speed, or in front of cameras, or right before a big meeting where you're supposed to arrive like a king. It could have caused a crash, or made you look weak, or both. Grant swallowed hard. His mouth was dry. He ran a hand down his tie, as if he could pull himself back together with fabric and manners. Who would do that? He asked, but his voice cracked at the end. He already knew the answer was going to hurt. Marcus leaned against the edge of the workbench. His arms were heavy. His eyes were tired. But his mind was clear. It wasn't random, Marcus said. This isn't some street prank. This is corporate. This is planned. Someone wanted your car to fail, and they wanted you to blame me. They wanted you angry. They wanted you distracted. They wanted you to make a scene. Grant stared at him, blinking slowly, like his brain was trying to accept the truth it didn't want. In my world, Grant whispered, people don't do this. Not to me. Marcus let out a small breath that wasn't quite a laugh. In your world, Marcus said softly, people do whatever they think they can get away with. And they get away with a lot. Grant turned his head away, staring at the car as if it might give him answers. But the car was just metal. It couldn't explain betrayal. It couldn't explain greed. It couldn't explain the way power makes enemies in the same room where it makes friends. Marcus kept going, calm and exact, like he was explaining an engine issue. This device was placed where most mechanics wouldn't look. Marcus said, it's tied into your system in a way that looks like normal wiring. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They weren't trying to steal your car. They were trying to control your story. Grant's throat tightened. His eyes darted to the corner window where security men were still outside, waiting. Strong men, loyal men, or so he thought. In that moment, even their presence didn't feel safe. For what? Grant asked. Why would anyone want to? Marcus didn't finish his sentence for him. He didn't need to. Grant's mind was already racing through boardrooms and smiles, through handshakes and laughter, through the people who called him sir and boss and visionary. Marcus watched Grant carefully. He had seen this before, just not in a billionaire. The moment a man realizes the danger is coming from inside his own circle, that's a different kind of fear. That's a fear money can't buy its way out of. Grant's shoulders sank. For the first time since he walked into that shop, he looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, just human, just a man standing in a garage at dawn, realizing his empire had cracks. Grant's voice dropped to a whisper. I almost destroyed you over this. The words came out like a confession, like a man saying out loud what his soul already knew. Marcus wiped his hands slowly with a rag. His movements were steady, controlled. He looked Grant in the eye. You didn't almost, Marcus said. You tried. The sentence was simple. It didn't need decoration. It didn't need anger. It was just truth. Grant flinched as if Marcus had struck him, his eyes filled with something unfamiliar. Not rage, not pride, shame. He looked around the shop, and for the first time, he really saw it. The cracked walls, the faded sign, the worn-out tools that had still done honest work, the old coffee cup on the bench, the stained floor that carried years of effort, and the quiet dignity that held the whole place together like invisible beams. Grant's voice was low. "I thought money made me better," he said. "I thought it meant I was smarter, stronger, worth more." He paused, swallowing hard. "But tonight," he continued, "I was the poorest man in this room." Marcus didn't respond, not because he didn't hear him, but because sometimes silence is the only answer that fits. Marcus had spent years being forced to explain himself, forced to prove his worth, forced to stay calm while others spoke to him like he was dirt. Grant looked at the device again in Marcus's hand. You could have let me blame you," Grant said quietly. "You could have taken my money, fixed the car, and kept your head down." Marcus's eyes were steady. "And then what?" Marcus asked. "The next time you needed someone to blame, you'd come back again. Or you'd find another man like me to crush." Grant's lips parted. No words came out. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "This shop isn't just a place," Marcus said. "It's my father's name. It's my family's food. It's my people's jobs. You walked in here like you were doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful you were breathing the same air as me." Grant's eyes dropped. His shoulders curled inward. "I was wrong," he whispered. The words were small, but they were heavy. They didn't sound like a billionaire's usual apology. They sounded like a man who had finally met his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. Grant reached into his wallet, pulling out fast, like muscle memory. Like he could solve this the way he solved everything else, with cash. Marcus watched him. Grant paused. His fingers hovered over the bills. Then he stopped. His hand trembled. Slowly, he slid the wallet back into his pocket. Not a tip, not charity, not a payment to erase guilt. Instead, Grant extended his hand. "I want to make this right," he said, voice thick. "Not just for my car, but for what I said, for what I assumed, for how I looked at you." Marcus stared at the hand for a moment. This was the part nobody saw. The part that didn't make headlines. The part where a man who has been hurt has to decide what kind of person he wants to be next. Marcus had every reason to refuse. Every reason to let Grant walk out, feeling the weight of his shame alone. But Marcus also knew something deeper. If you let bitterness own you, you become a prisoner too. Marcus took a slow breath. He looked at Grant, really looked at him. Not the suit, not the power. The man, the fear in his eyes, the shame on his face, the cracks in his voice. Then Marcus reached out and shook his hand. The grip wasn't weak. It wasn't eager. It was steady. A handshake between two men, not a billionaire and a mechanic. Grant's eyes closed for a second, like the gesture hit him in the chest. "I'll handle this," Grant said quietly, glancing at the device again. "Whoever did this, I'll find them." Marcus nodded once. "Do that," he said. "And next time you walk into a room like this, remember something." Grant looked at him. Marcus's voice was calm, but it carried steel. "Respect doesn't come from money," Marcus said. "It comes from how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you." Grant swallowed, nodding slowly. He looked around one more time, as if the shop had become a lesson written in oil and sweat. When he finally walked toward the door, the morning light caught his face, and for a moment, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a man leaving a place that changed him. Outside, his security opened the SUV door. Grant paused before getting in. He glanced back at Marcus through the rain-streaked glass of the garage door. Marcus stood in the doorway, hands still stained, shoulders still tired, but his posture was different now. Taller, not because he had won, not because he had humbled a billionaire, but because he had kept his dignity when someone tried to steal it. Grant nodded once, like a silent promise. Then he climbed into the SUV, and the car pulled away, splashing through puddles as it disappeared into gray morning. Marcus watched it go, The shop was quiet again. The storm was gone, but the night had left its mark. Marcus turned back inside. He looked at his father's old tools, the ones that never judged him, the ones that only responded to hard work. He picked up his rag and wiped his hands again, but some stains never fully come off. Some stains are reminders. A broken car had brought them together, but dignity changed them forever. And the lesson, the kind that reaches beyond garages and billionaires, sat in the air like morning light. A man's worth is not measured by his bank account, but by the respect he gives when he thinks no one deserves it.